It's very cool. All right, well, we'd like to welcome everybody here this morning. And to our friends joining us over the web, good morning from Las Vegas. We want to thank everybody for attending today's live streaming webcast event with #1 best-selling author Jeff Kinney, a presentation about the incredible trajectory of the best-selling Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, and a behind-the-scenes look at Book 8, Hard Luck, which goes on sale tomorrow, November 5th. Sponsored by Abrams Books, the Vegas Valley Book Festival, and School Library Journal, we're coming to you live from the historic 5th Street School, beautiful facility right here in Las Vegas. I'm Kevin Janison, the author of Deputy Dorkface and the meteorologist on News 3 here in Las Vegas, and I will be your moderator today. But before we go any further, we do have a few housekeeping notes to go through. For those of you here in the auditorium, we ask that you please turn off your cell phones and any other devices that might make noise. And we also ask that you do not take flash photography during the presentation. If your phone rings, please expect a visit from Guido and Rocco. For those of you out there on the internet, make sure your pop-up blockers are turned off. If you are experiencing technical problems, please use the red Q&A button on the audience console, and the webcast tech team will get to you as soon as possible. If your screen becomes locked due to local network congestion, try using F5 to refresh the webcast console. If you're on a Mac, use Command R. The slide presentation is available for download in the green resources folder on the bottom menu dock. A certificate for continuing education credit is also available in the resources folder labeled certificate. You'll also find a teaching guide and hard luck event planner in the resources folder. The webcast will be archived and available for on-demand viewing in about a week and will be accessible via slj.com/webcast for 90 days. If you have any questions or comments for Jeff Kinney, send those in at any time via the red Q&A box. Make sure to include the name of your school or library with your question. Jeff will be answering a select few questions from the live audience here and from the virtual audience after he speaks. We apologize in advance if we are unable, because of time, to answer all of the questions. You can follow us on Twitter as well. You can find us at SLJ Event or hashtag SLJ Hard Luck. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite an honor for me to introduce Jeff Kinney. Jeff is the best-selling author of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, which has over 115 million copies in print in 44 languages around the world. That is almost unheard of. Diary of a Wimpy Kid won Favorite Book at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards 3 times, and Jeff was twice voted Author of the Year at the Children's Choice Book Awards. Jeff was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world and is the creator of PopTropica.com, a virtual world for kids. And he told me that's his full-time job, that this is just something he does on the side. Wouldn't we all like that? The latest book in the series is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Book 8, Hard Luck, which has the biggest first printing of any book in 2013, with more in the series to come. He lives in Massachusetts, home of the world champion Boston Red Sox, along with his wife and 2 sons. Live from Las Vegas, please welcome Jeff Kinney.
Hi, everyone. How are you doing today? Thanks so much for coming out here to Las Vegas. I'm so excited to be here. We knew that when we named the book Hard Luck that we had to start in Las Vegas. Does that sound like a good idea? So we're starting here, and hi to everybody on the web. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I thought I'd tell you about how Hard Luck and how all my books come together. Does that sound like a good idea? Great. Okay. So my story always starts in January. Basically, in the fall preceding January, I have a lot of fun and kind of relax. And then around January, I have to get really serious, right? It's time to write one of my books. So this is how it started off this year. It started off in January. And what happens is most authors actually come up with the plot of their book, right? And then they start to write it. And for me, it's really different. I actually write all my jokes, and then I come up with the plot much later on. So what I do is I know that I have to come up with about 350 jokes per book. That's what it takes to make a good book, 350 jokes, which is kind of a lot. And I don't really know how to make the jokes come, right? I can sit there. I can't really make the jokes come on purpose. I have to sort of sit around and wait. So you're going to see that a lot of my writing of a book is kind of not a pretty picture, right? So this is what it looks like for me to write a book, right? That's me in my in the room where I work. That's my dog Thunder lying on the floor. He's very bored. But I got this thing called a video game rocker, right? And what's great about the video game rocker is that it doesn't quite let me fall asleep, right? If I had something that was too comfortable, I'd fall asleep. But I sit in this rocker, and I rock, and I try not to fall asleep, but every so often, it happens anyway. So my wife sometimes finds me like this, or one of my employees finds me like this. But sometimes I'll work for about 4 hours, and I won't come up with a single joke, and it's really kind of awful. I'll fall asleep. I won't come up with any ideas at all. So then what I'll do is I'll move to my upstairs where I have this comfortable recliner, right? This is what it looks like to put a Wimpy Kid book together. I sit in my comfortable recliner and I read tons of parenting magazines. I have all of these parenting magazines, educator magazines, and what they do is they're sort of my input. They spur ideas. They make me come up with ideas. But unfortunately, that recliner is pretty comfortable too, so after a while it looks like this. Most of the ideas from my books actually come from me lying on a couch, which of course you know how this is going to end. But almost all of my Wimpy Kid books have come from this scene right here. This is a room right off of my kitchen in my home. And I just lay there and lay there and lay there for hours and hours and hours. And so what I do is my family is very loud. I have 2 kids, right? And they're always like yelling and doing homework around me and things like that. And so I put a blanket over my head, right? So this is kind of the scene at the Kinney house night after night. And of course that always leads to this. And then every so often my wife will pop up in the room and she'll ask me to do something like put out the trash, right? And luckily I'm an author, so I can always tell her that, sorry, I'm working, right? So every so often I'll actually come up with an actual idea that I can use, and it's wonderful. And what I do is I look for something to write it down on. So I wanted to show you how I first started off. The way that I first wrote my first book was that I got this blank sketchbook, and it has 70 pages, but 77 is sort of my lucky number. So I added 7 pages to it, and I said what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I write a word of the book, I'm going to instead fill up this idea book, and then I'll start writing my actual book. And so it started off with pages like this. You can see this is one of the pages from my idea book. All right, and you've got lots of different ideas here, right? And as I went on, things started getting sort of smaller and smaller. I didn't really realize it at the time, but I was actually, I was nervous that I was working too fast. I was going to fill up my idea book before I was really ready to tell the story. And eventually it looked like this, right, which is totally insane, I can see now. And when I started this, I was 28, right? I'm 42 now. And what happens, kids, is in your 40s, you start to lose your eyesight, right? And so I cannot see, I wouldn't be able to read what I wrote now these days. But I wanted to show you how a page breaks down. Here are some ideas. They're all very small here, so it's hard to see them. So I'm going to sort of zoom in. And you can see that, for example, here's a picture of Greg when he goes to his grandfather's house and he has to eat this horrible green bean salad, right? And so he stuffs it in his pockets, right? So he doesn't actually have to eat it. Grandpa leaves the room, he stuffs the green bean salad in his pockets, and he's like, it's leaking down his leg, but he's much happier with it leaking down his leg than in his stomach, right? And I actually did that as like a 22-year-old at my grandfather's house. Here's a picture of Greg's mom and dad in bed, and they're watching a romantic comedy, right? And my wife makes me watch lots of these. And this was actually in the movie. It was a scene in the movie. So you can see a lot of the ideas here made their way into the movies. For example, this wasn't in the movie, but here is where Manny goes to school on the very first day, and his very first day of school is on Halloween. and all the other kids are in their costumes, and it kind of really freaks him out. And so he drops out of school because of this. And that actually happened to my father. A lot of the stories in my Diary of a Wimpy Kid books come from things that happened to me, or people in my family, or people around me. Most of the stories have some sort of truth to them, or some kind of relationship to real life stories. And here's just another image right here, is that Greg and Rowley are waiting outside. They're camping out for this video game contest. And here's another picture in the lower right where Greg's Uncle Gary has been married so many times that his grandmother actually just cuts out a picture of the new wife and puts it on top of the old one. So lots of the ideas, came from my idea books. And then what's happened nowadays is that probably about 5 years ago I switched over. I used to write everything down on little sketchbooks, but now I use technology to help me out. I always have my phone or my iPad near me, so I write everything down, all my ideas on one of those devices. And what's nice is everything's synced up, so if I type something on one device, it automatically appears on another, so it's very handy for me. So here are a bunch of ideas from the new book. Unfortunately, there is a downside to using technology and having that around when you're trying to work. And you know what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes it's just unavoidable to play games and things like that. So I actually, as was mentioned before, I actually have to write at night because I have a day job. And how many kids here have heard of Pop Tropica? Yeah, good number. Cool. So Pop Tropica is my day job, and usually I'm either going into the office or working on a new island for Pop Tropica. So I have to work on my books at night. So finally, after 4 or 5 months, I don't know if I'm doing the math right, I actually have my 350 ideas. Unfortunately, by that time it's July, right? And my book is due on September 1st. So you can see that by this point I'm in really big trouble. So that's when I have to come up with a cover and a title. See, I don't know what my book's going to be about until I'm done collecting all of my ideas. Once I'm done collecting all my ideas, I say, okay, this looks like I could make a plot that goes in this direction. And for this book, it was all about luck and chance. So this is me picking out the color of a book. The color is really important. The new book is lime green, and it's really important to get lots and lots of options. So we look at lots of options, like I get paint chips from the store, and we look over them. I look over them with the people I work with and with my editor, with the designer at Abrams, and we try to figure out the best color, something that hasn't really been done before. So this time it was lime green, which was a lot of fun. And then I come up with cover concepts. So I knew it was going to be called Hard Luck. So here was one of the ideas that we really liked, which was that the U from luck was a horseshoe, because that's a symbol of luck, right? And it fell out of the title and bonked Greg on the head. But we realized we couldn't use this title because the book is printed in lots of languages all over the world, and in many of the languages they wouldn't have a U for a horseshoe or a U, and so we couldn't do that. So we had to abandon that design. This was a later design that I was pretty happy with, actually. And this is Greg in a sea of 8 balls, right? At one point we were going to call the title Blackballed, right? Which means, like, when you get blackballed, it means that you're an outcast with people you know. So eventually, really late in the game, right before the cover was really due, I came up with this little sketch here. And this is a sketch of Greg running through kind of a storm of 8 balls, and that became the final title. So it takes probably about a week to a week and a half to come up with the actual cover. After that, this looks very boring, and it is. I go to outlining my book, right? I take all of the jokes, I collect them, and I make them make some sense in a narrative. That's my plot. Unfortunately, this type of work is just as hard for me as it is to come up with ideas for my book. And unfortunately, by that time, it's summertime, and everybody's outside having fun. And I want to be out there, too. And my dog, Thunder, he wants to be out there, too. But unfortunately, we're not allowed. We have to write this book. We're in big trouble, me and Thunder. And so what I do to write my plot is I go under my desk. And sometimes my employees will walk in and find me under my desk, and I don't know what they think of that, but that's where I do my writing of my narrative. And I don't fall asleep under there, so no pictures of that. Anyway, I work, and I really am not allowed to take any breaks, but sometimes I do anyway, right? And, we have a swing in our front yard, and, it's just too irresistible to get out there and take some runs. And I can get some serious air, I have to say. And nobody ever believes me, but I'm telling you, one time I looped the loop. My kids won't believe me. Well, it might not be completely true. So, but that is impressive, you got to admit. So I spend the whole day, sometimes I spend a whole day writing one paragraph. It's often the first page of my book that takes 2 or 3 days to write. And it doesn't look like much, but you really have to get that first page right to grab the reader's attention. So I spend about 1 month, and then I send my book out to my editor, and I think when I send it off that the book is totally perfect and not one single word needs to be changed. And you can see that they make lots and lots and lots of suggestions. And we go through probably about 8 rounds of this. We go back and forth while I'm drawing my book. Now, by this point, it's August, right? And like I said, I have 1 month to complete the book. And I have to draw 330 drawings, each one of which takes 1 hour to draw. So I'm in really big trouble by this stage because it's almost September, right? And I used to do all my drawings with pen and ink, but I found out that I was really lousy at drawing with pen and ink. I really stink at it. And so I got this computer tablet, right, this big computer tablet, and I draw right on the screen. It's sort of like a gigantic iPad. And this thing is just, it's so heavy that it literally takes 2 people to move it. I know that it seems strange, but it's true. So I zoom my drawings way up, and then I draw right on the screen. And I thought I'd try to show you what it looks like when I actually draw. Let's see if this works. This is either going to work or not. So I captured myself drawing one of these drawings. So here's a picture from Hard Luck. So I start off with the rough, which I call the pencil, but it's not really. It's kind of like colored ink. And I zoom way in. I use a program called Flash, actually, which is what we use to make Pop Tropica. What I really like about cartooning is that you're trying to tell a story with just a few lines. It's different than illustrations. In illustrations, you're trying to, there's a lot of detail, but in cartooning, it's really simple. So I'm trying to tell a whole story with not too many lines. And there's this quote I heard from a cartoonist in the 1800s, late 1800s. And his editor challenged him. He said, I want you to try to draw with half as many lines. And the cartoonist said, if I did that, I'd have to charge you twice as much. I really like that idea that a good cartoonist can express themselves really well in just a few lines. So this is what it looks like when I'm drawing one of my pictures. It takes a really long time. I'm showing you here that this is, I think, Greg, right? It's Greg's hand. You'll see I'll make lots of mistakes, and I'll keep going back and smoothing things out, redrawing lines. And that's how I work. There are a lot of other cartoonists that work much, much faster than me. I think most cartoonists, it would take them about 15 minutes to do this one drawing that takes me about an hour. So you can see here I'm drawing the word bubble. These curved lines are really hard for me, and you see I have to keep correcting them. So that's what it looks like when I draw one of my drawings in the book. Let's go back to the slideshow here. And here's a drawing from the book that was kind of fun to do. This one took a little bit longer. You can see I used all sorts of different colors here. Greg is babysitting or pet sitting his cousin's pets, and you can see they practically have a whole zoo. So this one took me probably about maybe 2 hours to do this drawing. It did take longer. By that time, I have to draw for about 15 hours a day. I usually have my meals in my lap. I don't leave my desk. No swinging at that time of year. So it's really serious. And eventually, I hit send, and then I get to relax for a few weeks, and eventually, the book comes to me in the mail. And it's really a cool moment in a way. It's like all my hard work goes into this one, this one book that's 217 pages long. And I always think, wow, it doesn't feel like much for 9 months of hard work. I have this one book to show for it. but it's really rewarding. And I get to put the book on the shelves with the others and see how it fits. And I think this one fits pretty well. So it was a lot of fun doing this book. So eventually, I get to do what I'm doing now. And today's the first day of my tour. This is a bus from the third wheel, my last book. But we've got outside right now the Hard Luck bus. I hope you guys saw it out there. Take your picture in front of it if you can. It's really kind of cool. And it's this bus with, it's got bunk beds in it and televisions, and we sing karaoke at night, and it's really a lot of fun, actually. So this is the fun part. This, for me, is the start of the fun part, where I get out and I meet the people who are the kids who are reading my book. So it's really, really fun. So I thought I'd show you guys a sneak peek of Hard Luck. Does that sound like a good idea? Great. Okay, in this book, Rowley Jefferson has a girlfriend. That's how the third wheel ended, is that Rowley gets a girlfriend, which just upsets the universe that Greg lives in, right? And kids, one day you'll find out that your best friend has a girlfriend or has a boyfriend, and you'll find out that they're totally obnoxious when this happens. They totally change their personality, and you'll be like, how could this happen? You know, how could they change their personality? But Greg and Rowley, when they were, bachelors, they used to do anything they wanted, and they would blow bubbles in their chocolate milk at lunch, right? And then, unfortunately, Rowley's girlfriend has put a stop to that, right? So Greg decides that he's going to have to get himself a new best friend. So, of course, he turns to Fregley, all right? He decides to turn to Fregley, and, of course, things go really haywire from there. So here's a picture of Greg coming to pick Fregley up and to walk to school together. And, of course, things aren't going well. I don't even know if that's physically possible, for his head to be like that. But I thought it was a funny drawing. So like I said, it was a lot of fun to work on this book. It was a lot of hard work, but now I get to do the fun part. And I think it's time for me to take your questions. So does anybody have questions? We have a moderator who's going to handle this for us.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. So we've got several questions from in here and also from online who are watching it across the World Wide Web. The first question from here at the Fifth Street School in Las Vegas was very simply, how did you get your first book published? And I think I was reading, too, that didn't it take like 8 years? So maybe you could talk about that process and what it was like.
It did. It took me about, what happened was I wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist, and I kept sending out my submissions, and nobody liked my work. They told me they didn't like it or just gave me a really anonymous rejection letter. And so I said, my problem is I'm just not a very good illustrator. I'm not a good artist. I'm not a good cartoonist. And so then I got this idea to start writing like a kid or drawing like a kid. And I figured if I did that, maybe I could break in. And so I did. I worked on it for 8 years and then finally showed it to somebody, and I had the good luck of having them say yes.
One person? You showed it to one publisher?
I did. I showed it to one publisher, yes. I went to New York Comic Con and walked around, and I asked a few people, I said, hey, I'd like to show you what I have. And they said, no, we don't want to see it. This isn't the right place. And then one gentleman, whose name is Charlie Kochman, he did want to see what I had to show him, and he took one look at it, and he said, this is exactly what we're looking for. So it was very strange to have 3 years of rejections in newspaper cartooning, and then 8 years of work, and then to sort of break in right away.
And of all the authors that you've run into over your lifetime, how many do you think have approached one publisher and gotten published?
Well, that's funny you ask, because usually what somebody does is they approach an agent, and an agent will take your work to the publishers. So it was very, very strange that I actually was able to go to a publisher directly. That's very odd.
How cool is that? Okay, we have a question all the way from Waunakee Intermediate School in Wisconsin. I'm sure they're locked indoors for the winter. We kid because we care from Las Vegas. The question is there any color you will not consider for your book covers?
Yes, and I'll bet some boys in the audience can guess. Pink, that's right. I can't go there. I want to go there. We had a Valentine's book. Our last book was Valentine's Day, and so we made it chocolate brown. We realized it would probably kill off the whole series with boys if I made a pink book. I wish I could, but I can't.
That's okay.
Sorry, girls.
Although it is a Wimpy Kid after all.
That's true.
So the question from here inside the Fifth Street School: what were some of the favorite books that you read when you were young?
When I was a kid, I really liked books by Judy Blume. Have you guys read Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by chance? Yeah, I see some kids out here. And Freckle Juice, that was a great one. Beverly Cleary. You can tell I had an older sister who brought things into the house. I did not read Are You There, Guy? It's Me, Margaret. Thank goodness. Some moms know what I'm talking about here. But I read a lot of Judy Blume, and then I read fantasy like The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and things like that.
It seems like you don't have a whole lot of spare time in your hands, but do you do any reading now?
I never read. I only listen because I'm always doing two things at once. So I have to listen to books instead of read them. And I actually really like audiobooks.
And I had a quick question about being under the desk. How exactly are you writing in the anti-gravitational position?
Right. That's a good question. I go under my desk because it's a world where there's no distractions. I think today with technology, you've always got something chirping and beeping at you. You always want to check your email and things like that. And it's actually really hard to produce anything. So that's been a challenge for me ever since technology has gone into your pocket.
And Thunder the dog doesn't come and lick you or anything?
He actually does. He hates it. He hates being where I work. He hates being in that space, and he's always looking out the window. And sometimes he'll lick my face or something just to tell me to go, to leave. So I can't keep him with me too much.
Okay, we have another question from those watching us streaming online live. This from West Hills Middle School in Michigan. This is a good question from Abby Siegel here. How do you know your jokes are funny?
I usually know if something makes me uncomfortable first, right? If I think, oh, I can't use that. And then I usually find a way to use it. We saw recently on my street, one of the parents had put out the potty seat that a kid had used, right? They put it because they were done with it. Now the kid's like 9 or 10, but the family finally got rid of the potty seat. So there's this potty seat like sitting out by the curb for recycling. And I'm like, that's something only a parent would do and not understand how mortifying it is for a kid. So those are the kinds of ideas that often make their way into my books.
Was your neighbor actually using that potty seat at age 9?
I didn't test it. I didn't swab it or anything with a cotton ball, so I'm not really sure.
The fact that they put it out for recycling is worrisome, let me tell you.
Yes, exactly. That's going to end up in your plastic spoon at Denny's, I think.
Well, what a great diet strategy that is. Okay, so
sorry, Denny's.
We have another question from here in-house. You mentioned that there will be more. Somebody would like to know how many more Diary of a Wimpy Kid books there will be. I'm
under contract for at least 2 more after this 8th book, but I'd really like to keep writing as long as the books are good. I strive for consistency. If the books ever get bad, I'll stop writing.
And you mentioned about the jokes. I just want to go back because I did have a follow-up question on that. When you do have something that you think might be a little borderline, do you test your jokes out on the wife and the kids or the neighborhood, or how do you know that you want to go forward with that joke?
I do. I test them out on a number of people, and there have been jokes that have dropped off, because of that, because I thought that they worked, and then I got a little bit of eyebrow raising from the people around me. So I don't use those. I never want to cause offense.
All right, we have another question coming from Lynn Shea on the World Wide Web. I think you sort of answered this during your presentation, but the question is, do you ever get writer's block? And if you do, what do you do to get over that? And where did your ideas come from for the Diary of a Wimpy Kids to begin with?
Those are great questions. I think I answered those with showing pictures of me asleep. I always have writer's block. The ideas never flow for me. And I spared you pictures of me in a hot tub. I also try that out. And, of course, I fall asleep. So I always have writer's block. It's difficult for me.
Is there some time or some place where the ideas start flowing more freely? You might be driving or in the shower, which we don't want to see that
right,
picture.
You don't want to see that either.
Is there any time where all of a sudden things start clicking?
Never. Unfortunately, never. It's just really difficult for me to write. It's like if I told you right now, come up with something new, original, and funny right now, how long will it take you to come up with something out of thin air? It's tough. It's tough to do that. Do you have something?
Me personally?
Right.
No, but I've got old ones.
Right.
We have a question from here in-house, and that is, what is your favorite thing about Las Vegas, and what have you been doing while you've been in town?
Oh, that's a great question. Luckily, I'm a very G-rated kind of guy. So my very favorite thing in Las Vegas, and maybe the world, and I'm not kidding, is the fountains of Bellagio. Very beautiful. I think it's sort of one of the wonders of the world, actually. I think it's beautiful, beautiful. We went to a show, La Rev, last night at the Wynn, and also we spent a little time in the casinos. You have to do that.
What were you playing?
Roulette. It's the only thing I can understand. We lasted about 5 minutes at the table.
That's right. We have another question from online, and from Lakewood, Colorado. Does Greg really want to marry Holly Hills?
That's a good question. Holly Hills is a funny character because in my books, I think she only shows up in book 3, maybe in book 4 for a minute. It's really brief. But she sort of became her own thing in the movies. She became a main character. Peyton List did such a good job. She's on the show Jessie now. Have you guys seen that? She did a great job bringing that character to life. So a lot of people think of Holly Hills as a big presence in the Wimpy Kid universe, but she's not in the books, and she is in the movies. Same with Patty Farrell. I think she only shows up in the first or second book, and then she's a main character because Lane McNeil did such a great job of making this scary character, Patty.
We have a couple of follow-up questions about Greg. First of all, why does he only have 4 fingers?
That's a great question. Most cartoon characters only have 4 fingers because, like I said before, in cartooning, you're trying to use just a few lines to tell a big story. And 4 fingers is sort of enough. It's 3 fingers and a thumb. In Japan, they won't allow me to draw my characters with 4 fingers because there's a taboo in Japan where you can't draw people with 4 fingers because it's a symbol of death, right? And there was a group of people called the 4-fingered people hundreds of years ago that were discriminated against, and to this day you can't have characters with 4 fingers. Very interesting.
That is interesting. I think along those lines of bad luck and everything, you'll find that when you go back to your hotel, there is no 13th floor on the elevator here in Las Vegas.
That's right.
Well.
Great example.
Another question about Greg. Will he ever grow up?
Greg will never grow up. It always stressed me out when I was writing these books because I thought I was creating a literary character like Harry Potter, one that has to get older each year. But I realized that Greg is really a cartoon character. He lives in the cartoon world. And Charlie Brown has a first day of school every year, but you never say, hey, shouldn't this guy be like 89 years old or something like that? So there's something called a suspension of disbelief, where your readers can kind of go along with the idea, and they don't really question it. They also don't question, why does this kid have 3 hairs on the top of his head?
We'll go back online. Taylor from Mast Landing School wants to know if you ever plan to have colored illustrations in your book.
That's a good question. I also believe as a cartoonist that you should not use color unless you have to. Because I think, again, going with the simplicity idea. Every so often, though, like in the Do-It-Yourself book, I tried out some color comics. Maybe one day we'll revisit it, but something I really like about Greg is that he doesn't, you don't know what his ethnicity is. He's sort of blank. And I like it that kids around the world can kind of picture themselves as Greg. And if I color him, I have to make a choice about his skin color, which I really don't want to do.
You mentioned, too, while you were writing and you're going through all the processes and the procedure, you just hit send, and about a month later you get a book in the mail.
That's right.
Do you have an editor, or are you editing yourself as you go through?
My editor is probably watching this right now, probably like, "Arr." Yes, you probably saw those images of all the notes. My editor works with me very closely, and he actually comes up, and sometimes we sit in our chairs and fall asleep next to each other, but that's weird. Sorry, Charlie. But we work hard on the book. Like I said, sort of 8 or 9 drafts we go through, and sometimes the book changes a lot from the beginning to the end. It's always good to have an editor to tell you how to improve, because sometimes you can't see it for yourself.
And as you go through that process, if you might disagree with the editor's changes or additions or subtractions, do you put on the gloves and go 10 rounds in the ring, or how do you solve that?
Yes, in every book there's at least one joke that my editor hates and I like, and then we fight, and then I always, at the end, I say, I'm keeping this one in the book. And he'd have to agree with me on that. And sometimes the jokes are really dumb and no kid ever likes them, and then I feel foolish. And sometimes they work well, and he feels a little foolish.
Could you work with another editor, or is this now a team project?
I like working with my editor. I hope that I'll keep working with my editor forever.
Another question from the internet. This comes to us from Bia Menendez. Hi, Mr. Kinney. If you were not such a famous author, what would your dream job be?
My dream job would be doing what I'm doing, working on Pop Tropica. I like it a lot, and that's what I'd be doing full-time, even if I didn't have this.
You mentioned this is, are you actually on the bus going from town to town? Or
Yes, yeah.
Really? Very nice.
Yeah.
So somebody in here would like to know where you're heading after you leave Las Vegas. They want to follow you.
We're going for lunch, right? And I think we're going to try indoor skydiving. You can only do that kind of thing in Las Vegas. You guys are lucky out here. Can't do that in Plainville, where I'm from. And then we're heading through Arizona. We're going to go through California all the way up to Vancouver eventually. So it's going to be a 3-week tour. And then we go where I can't take the bus, which is to England and Germany. And then later on, hopefully next year, I'll go to Spain, Israel. So I get around.
How cool is that? We do have another one coming in on the internet from Melissa Guerrero, and she would like to know, do you ever get inspiration from real-life events with your kids? And she's actually coming to us from Oxford Elementary in Maine.
Every so often I will get an idea from my kids. Less than I would hope, but sometimes I do. Like, for example, my kid, Will, he was in preschool, and the kids were all telling on each other. They were all tattling on each other to the teacher. And it took up all of the teacher's time. So the teacher had a stuffed animal that was called the tattle turtle and put it in the corner, right? And said, if you have a problem, go tell the tattle turtle, right? So these kids would literally go up and say, Johnny bit me, or, something like that. And I love ideas like that. I love things, like I have something called hero points in this book that's sort of taken from my kids' schooling.
Along those lines, somebody has also written in here and wants to know if you plan on writing anything besides Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah, I have a few ideas. I actually had an idea that came to me in a dream last night, which would be to write a book in which I didn't plan anything at all, that I surprised myself with everything that happens. Now, I don't know if it would be a good book or not, but I know some cartoonists who write like that, like Stephan Pastis, who does Timmy Failure. That's how he writes. He likes to surprise himself, and that might be fun.
Another person is emailing in, and they would like to know, they want some inside information on the next 2 Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, and what you can tell us here between the 300 or 400 people assembled and anybody online, what they will be about.
They will be
just between us.
They will be about 217 pages. Well, we've got the potty seat joke, and from there, I'm not really sure. I have nothing else, so we'll see. I'll know when you know.
That's a good. Are you married to 217 pages? Is that it, or can you go a little longer, a little fewer?
No, I like that number a lot. It's the first book was 217 pages, and I like to keep it like that because I like it how all the books are the same width on the shelf. So it's like putting together a puzzle, sort of.
What happens if the ideas keep flowing? Do you start cutting them out?
I wish that would happen, but there's no chance, I could tell you now.
No chance at all. There's another question here: is how long does it take for you to choose your cover? And the whole color thing is interesting. Are you doing that by yourself?
It takes about a week to work through the color. And this one was a weird book because you can see that it's very luminescent, right? It's very bright. And that's actually hard to do in printing. They have to bring in something called the 5th color. And I don't quite understand it, but the idea is they have to bring in something a little extra for brightness. And so this one was a hard color to work out. But I usually do. I work with my editor, the designer at Abrams, and other people around me to really test things out. It's surprising how difficult it is to get the right color. But you know it when you have it.
We have another question of somebody who wants to know a little more about Jeff Kinney, and that is when you're not writing, when you're not doing Pop Tropica, when you're not asleep on the couch or
Right.
under the desk, and you're not asleep in the recliner or the boogie chair,
Right.
what are you doing? What do you do? What do you do that you enjoy?
First of all, I don't know what a boogie chair is, but that's a little. But I actually am a Cub Master, den leader in our Cub Scouts pack, and I'm my kids' soccer coach, both of my kids' basketball coach, and then I go to lots of Patriots and Celtics games. That's my life.
Wow. No Red Sox games?
I went to one this year, so it was really cool to get to go to see one of those games.
And as the coach of your kids' soccer and basketball teams, do you ever get other parents telling you that you need to play their kids a little more?
We play everybody evenly. Everybody gets an equal chance. We're at that stage, luckily. I think we have about time for about 2 or 3 more.
Okay. We have a question here on... this is a good question. This is coming to us from Vivian Mast Landing School. And why is 77 your favorite number?
77 is, this is actually a weird kind of thing. 77 is sort of my personal favorite number, but the number 33 has been like really instrumental in my own family, and it keeps coming up at these really weird times. And for example, when I went to New York to Comic-Con, I was on the 33rd floor in room 333, and I went to a Billy Joel concert that night, and I was in section 33, and then the next day, like when I showed my book to my editor, somebody walked up to me with a 33 on their shirt. And it's just, I don't know if there's anything to it, but it's a weird thing. It's a weird coincidence. So 77 is like my own personal lucky number.
Very nice. And we do have a question here, and I'd like to, if you could expand on it too. The question is, it's coming from Freeport, Maine. Who is your favorite character in your books? And also, has it become easier since the characters have become more established to create new experiences and adventures that they might encounter?
It gets harder and harder to write because you feel like you've done everything already before. That's why with television sitcoms, a lot of times they kind of run out of ideas and they say, okay, well, the family's now going to Europe or something like that. They need to spice it up or bring in a young, cute character or a dog or something like that. And I've done that in my own books. My favorite character to write for is Rowley Jefferson because he's kind of a doofus, but he likes being a kid. I think a lot of kids, it's just very natural, is that you always want to reach that next age level. You know, you want to grow up and get the freedoms that you have at the next age level. And then when you're an adult, you want to go backwards. But Rowley likes being a kid. He knows it's a good deal, and he's comfortable in his own skin, so he's my favorite.
Well, Jeff, we can't thank you enough for spending some time. And the first stop on your tour here in Las Vegas, we really appreciate your coming down and being part of the Vegas Valley Book Festival as well. And this was truly special. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. I'll be right back.